This is my story about the time I had brain surgery. I have stage 4 melanoma in my brain. That's skin cancer, by the way, but it spread to my brain. And in November 2022, after immunotherapy and radiotherapy, the growth just kept popping up. Targeted therapy wasn't helping either, so my doctors decided to remove the most persistent offender surgically. I knocked on the door of the neurological ward at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night with my bag in my hand. Now, it's a secure ward, so I stood for a few minutes in the dark, deserted corridor, wondering if anybody was going to let me in. Eventually, a nurse poked her head around the door. Can I help you? I'm here to get brain surgery. You must be John. We are expecting you. Sorry, I nearly didn't open the door. I thought you were a visitor, and visiting hours are pretty strict in here. I followed her along the ward through the bays. The lights were dim, but I could see patients watching me as I went past. And the nurse was still talking. You don't look like a patient. I know it's quiet tonight, but you're not going to get much sleep while you're in here. Some of the patients get very rowdy. Here's your bed. I'll leave you to try and settle in. In my bay, there were 6 patients with a whole range of problems. Some seemed oblivious to everything going on in the world, in a coma, fed through tubes. Others were very vocal, constantly making comments which somehow managed to be both complimentary and deeply offensive at the same time, or calling out day and night, convinced that the staff and other patients were trying to attack them. There was one patient had a strange contraption going on into his head with a spirit level attached. And there were others who looked completely normal, walking about the ward, but when they began to speak, what came out was nonsense. The full-time staff were incredible, patient and kind. Nursing assistants coaxing patients to feed themselves and shaving patients who needed it, cleaning up after them whenever they threw food and other things over themselves. The speech therapist, I remember her helping one man to read his daily bread Bible notes. But the ward was dangerously understaffed. And the bank nurses, the temporary ones who come in to fill in the gaps, they had a completely different attitude to those who spend their lives caring for neurology patients. They were impatient and frustrated, sometimes even verging on careless, as if these patients don't really matter. They're never going to become productive members of society. They have no prospects, no visible future. And I had to wonder, after this surgery, will I be like that? Before my surgery, I had an MRI to get an accurate 3D image of where the surgeon could cut me open. He glued markers onto my head that would show up on the MRI so that he would be able to line up the images with my skull using augmented reality goggles so that he would know exactly where the tumour was and how much he could safely remove. Class. Now, I've had a few MRIs, so I rattled through the questions. Do you have any metal plates or screws? Yes. Have you ever welded or worked with metal? Yes. Have you any bullets or shrapnel? No. Have you ever had brain surgery? No. Do you have a pacemaker or a glucose monitor? No. And so on and so on. When I'm having surgery, I no longer tell anybody what time the surgery is scheduled or how long it's expected to last. The last surgery I had, it took hours longer than they expected it to. And my family and my friends, well, they worry. Well, this time, the surgery before mine took longer than expected. And I was pacing about the ward waiting for them to come and get me. Eventually they did, and even though I was bouncing with adrenaline, I had to lie on the bed as they wheeled me into the operating theatre. When the operation was finished, my surgeon phoned Claire immediately and told her that he was very pleased with how it had gone, so that's good. He said he couldn't say anything else before the lab results came back, but he was very happy. I woke up in the recovery ward and saw a familiar face. Jacqueline is a theatre nurse who used to live across the road from us. She had spotted me in the corridor and waited around after her shift just to say hello. I was completely lucid, probably more than a little bit high. Most of the nurses on the ward were Filipino, and I tried to get them to teach me a few words. One of them even lent me her phone so that I could call Claire. Then, after a couple of hours in recovery, a porter wheeled me back to the neurology ward, and that's when things started to go downhill. Over the next few hours, the nurses noticed my brain function declining. Now, normal hospital observations include things like blood pressure, temperature, and respiration. Neurology observations are different. They test your eyes, your motor, and your verbal responses. So they always include simple questions. What's your name? Where are you? What month is it? And I always knew the answers. But I couldn't always say what I wanted to say. For example, when they asked, do you know where you are? I tried to say that I was on ward 4F, but what came out of my mouth was R5. I knew it was wrong. I could hear that it was wrong, but that's what my brain produced. Other times, the word I wanted was just gone. That feeling where it's on the tip of your tongue, but completely unreachable. So I started switching words, and instead of 4F, I would say hospital. The meaning survived. I got my message across, but I knew it wasn't what I really wanted to say. Reading and writing text messages and WhatsApp messages was strange. I would type a message, but I couldn't tell if I had typed what I wanted to say. I had to ask other people if my messages even made sense. My sister said she knew how messed up my head was because my messages didn't have any punctuation. and receiving messages, I had to reread even simple messages several times before I understood them. There was one night, sometime around 4 or 5 a.m. I think, I spent an hour relearning how to tell the time. Why do none of the numbers on a clock relate to the time they're telling? It suddenly all felt completely illogical. It's a strange thing to experience, being confused, but being aware that you're confused. In my head, I tried again and again to tell myself the fairy tale of the 3 little pigs, or the Bible story of the sower. You know, the one whose seed landed on the path, or it was eaten by birds, or it was choked by weeds, or it landed on good soil. But those stories have a logical progression that I just could not keep straight in my head. I found the whole experience fascinating, just watching my brain misfire. I wanted to understand what was happening inside my head. So I was very keen to see a speech therapist, a speech and language therapist. I wanted a proper assessment from somebody who actually knew what they were talking about, rather than me trying to work it out inside my own head. Now, when she had the time, the first thing that she did was ask me to explain how to make a cup of tea. I don't drink tea. I have no desire to drink tea, and I do not know how to make a cup of tea. So that's not a great start. Instead, she asked me to describe making a ham and cheese sandwich, and that was better. She explained what was happening in my brain and how to start working around the issues that I was facing. Apparently, switching words to find alternative words is a skill that most people have to learn, and I was naturally good at it. It turns out learning Latin at school is actually useful. But you see, understanding complex sentences, that was beyond me. The pink pencil is under the green shoe, and I had to choose from 6 images to decide which one was the best. Completely flummoxed me. By Thursday, just 4 days after brain surgery, I was well enough to go home. My brain was far from normal, but I was safe enough, and I had a good enough support network around me to survive daily life. Plus, they needed the bed. In those 4 days, I saw dramatic improvements in every patient in our 6-bed bay. And I discovered that neurology is not thankless at all. The nurses, the physios, the speech therapists, everyone in those wards who cared about us performed miracles, patiently rebuilding lives every single day. They aren't managing decline. They're building recovery. Before I left, I was given another brain MRI to see how successful the surgery had been. The same radiographer as I had at the start of the week asked the same questions. Do you have any metal plates or screws? Yes. Have you ever welded or worked with metal? Yes. I had to stop him. Hold on. I know that I'm the same person that you scanned earlier this week, but I've been through a lot since then. I'm struggling to understand the questions that you're asking. So he slowed down. Bullets or shrapnel? No. Do you have a pacemaker or a glucose monitor? No. Have you ever had brain surgery?